Today, we're chatting with Cindie Chavez about spotting mental and emotional patterns within yourself so that you can more easily process negative feelings and more easily lean into positive ones. This is the law of attraction like you've never heard it before. Otherwise known as that guy who wrote the last law of attraction book you'll ever need to read. And we've got another special feature interview. And this one's going to be a fun one. Cindie Chavez is the love and magic coach and is a certified life, relationship, and mentor coach and an energy leadership master practitioner, as well as an author, speaker, and teacher. She's built a reputation for bringing a profound level of clarity to her clients through her potent sense of intuition, and her areas of expertise and interest include communication and conflict resolution, mentor coaching, conscious creation, astrology, tarot, magic, and spirituality. And without any further ado, because now I'm really excited for this, Cindie, thank you so much for being here and welcome to my YouTube channel.
Well, thank you, and congratulations on your YouTube channel. Looks like you're doing really well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's funny. It's like doing the YouTube channel. I know sometimes I'll do interviews and sometimes I'll teach methods and sometimes I'll answer questions. And it's one of those things where like the reason I started it was so that I can have these kind of conversations whenever I wanted, when I found someone fun like you. So I have no doubt that we're going to walk down a few roads here that'll be really beneficial to the viewer. So I'm trying to think, like, there's so many places to start because reading that bio of yours, you've got so much in terms of, how you've leveled up and how you've kind of grown into what you do. I guess one thing that kind of pops off the top of my mind that I wanted to make sure to ask you is, in your experience in working with people, what are the most profound and frequent blocks that you end up always seeing them encounter with?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I like to think that one of the things I'm really good at is pattern recognition. And that's what, that's not one block, right? But I have a tendency to be able to see really quickly certain patterns. And most of the blocks, every block pretty much always goes back to a story that my client is telling. And most of the time when we all have stories that we tell about ourselves. And I believe that our experience in life is always just a reflection of that story that we're telling. And so much of our story we tell automatically, and we tell without really thinking of it much, because we tell it a lot. Like if you think of parts of your story that might not really affect your life in some big way, but that you say all the time, like people say, oh, I never remember names. Or people say that, well, like I have a good story. It's one of my stories is that I joke that I have the punctuality gene, because I'm really good at like recognizing how long something's going to take and be able to stack my schedule up to where I'm not late for things, right? But then I've heard other people say, oh, I'm just late for everything. So they say that as part of their identity, and they tell that story over and over. And sometimes, many times, I catch clients telling a story, and I've heard it lots of times from them. I had a client that kept saying that a certain day of the year, a holiday, was always the worst day for her, and came to me worried about it because it was coming up. And I said, well, you've told me many times that this is always a hard day for you. And possibly your subconscious is just saying, yes, ma'am.
Right.
Our subconscious doesn't judge. Our subconscious, which Neville Goddard says is the part of us that's doing the creating, he likens it to a womb. And the ideas we put in there, they start creating. And our subconscious never says, oh, lady, that's a bad idea. Like, don't have that story, right? The subconscious just goes, okay. So, yeah. And starts like making it happen. And so I think it's hard for me to answer, like, what's the most common block, but it's always attached to a story.
Well, it's interesting to hear you put it that way because, I even think back to my book, like when I started off, one thing I wrote about was the disinterested donut guy. And I said that in the context of the universe, but, you know, there's so many things that are related and overlap and in parallel. Same with the subconscious mind in terms of that story, because whether you're feeding it to the subconscious mind, to the universe, whatever you're doing, you're sending out those instructions without realizing it. And that also reminds me of, I wish I can credit the person, because it's definitely not my thing, but I just remember someone telling a story on how someone was being coached in a golf game. And I don't know very much about golf, so bear with me. But basically the person was, they kept screwing up their swing, and they were told to fix something by just a little millimeter or something like that. And that one little shift made all the difference when they finally bought into it, because over the long flight of the ball, it corrects that much, which kind of, to me, mirrors what you're saying here. They say one thing about this is the worst type of day, or I'm not looking forward to this. And that cascades out, that ripples out into a whole new thing that they would not anticipate, but that if they were only aware of that story, they would be able to stop.
You know, that's a great analogy. And it's that exponential number kind of thing happening. And I have a story of my own that I sometimes will tell a client. That's that exact thing. I remodeled my kitchen. And when I did, I put a granite countertop. And the granite countertop stuck out about a 1/16 of an inch further than my tiled countertop used to stick out. That's not very much, right? Very tiny. And when the first few days that I was unloading my dishwasher, I was pulling a glass out and just grazed that countertop. And I realized that my muscle memory was actually coming within a 1/16 of an inch of my old counter, but I never noticed it because nothing ever happened. I didn't bang into it. I didn't crack a glass on it. And so I realized, wow, that is such a tiny amount of space. So it's like playing a musical instrument, right? Our muscle memory is keen. And we do that with our brain as well. And so sometimes the smallest shift. So what did I do? Well, the next few days, I was really careful because I didn't want to break a glass. And then my muscle memory adjusts to the new countertop. And now I can just, put those dishes away, and I never think about banging the glass into the side of the granite countertop. But it's the same way in all of our life. If we will just recognize this story that we've been telling over and over, and our brain going, okay, right? It's like sometimes people will make a plan, right? They'll say something like this: ooh, if this thing happens, I'm going to be so upset. Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like we program our subconscious. Do you hear me? Like, if this happens, you better go into upset mode, and the subconscious is going, okay, all right, whatever you say, you're the boss.
In that answer, there's actually something else popping up there that's really profound to me. And that's, you were speaking about like a fraction of a measurement of the old countertop.
Yeah.
And what you're speaking to there is precision. And we all have an amazing level of precision that we often don't appreciate. And that precision can be leveraged towards a positive or a negative outcome, a positive or negative habit, a positive or negative life. There's that incredible level of precision that's always in there. So we have this level of precision rather. And you're talking about there's patterns, you're spotting things with pattern recognition, you're helping people spot their story. So obviously, when people are told that, I'm going to assume here, they don't know it until it's shown to them. No one knows they're telling the story. But when they have the story laid out for them, assuming they can accept it, how do they go about, or how do you go about helping them to change their story in a way that's very intentional and that gets them out of those old patterns, because patterns are so strong? How do we get them out of that once they're stuck in it, but they realize they're stuck in it?
Well, the way it happens is first we make a commitment, right? I tell a joke sometimes. I told it recently to someone that I know that's actually in the restaurant business, so it was kind of funny. But I said, the difference between being interested or involved and being committed, right? So it's bacon and eggs. The chicken was involved and the pig was committed. Right? So sometimes.
So real quick, Cindie, your internet's a little bit slow. I'm going to ask you to repeat that because I think that's such an important thing. I want to make sure people hear that. Can you say that one more time, please?
Yeah, I said that, if we're interested or involved in something, and we get to make that choice, right? I can say, well, I'm not really committed to this outcome. I'm interested in it though, that's fine. But we're going to get a different outcome if we're just interested or involved as opposed to being committed. And the story I told was the short one. I wrote a blog post about this one time. I said, this is the shortest blog post I've ever written. Bacon and eggs. The chicken was involved and the pig was committed. So first I say, let's get intentional here and really make a commitment to change this story. And then the next thing that happens is the same thing that always happens over the course of changing our I don't want to say belief system. That sounds so big, but changing anything, changing a habit, right? Just the way I said the first few days, I had to be really intentional. It's like, oh gosh, I don't want to break these crystal glasses. I'm going to be really careful and watch how I'm putting them up and not smack the edge of that countertop. And over just a few days, it was actually very quick. I realized, I realized one day I went in, I put all the dishes away. I said, oh, wait, I didn't even pay attention. So that has shifted. So it's sort of like, in the early 80s, I was the lead singer in a rock band in San Francisco. And one day I noticed that all of us just really cussed a lot. Like we just cussed like a bunch of sailors. And I said, we got to stop this. Like, this isn't professional. We should stop. And what was so funny is everybody agreed and we noticed the same thing. And that is like, at first you notice that you do something after you've done it. Then you start noticing when those words are like, halfway out of your mouth. Oh, and you draw them back. Oh, excuse me. I shouldn't talk like that, and I'm really not being judgy about cussing. Cuss all you want. I don't care. I cuss quite a bit myself too at certain times. But then you recognize it before it comes out. You catch yourself before you say it, right? And then pretty soon you just don't do it anymore. And it's like this with any habit. With any habit, we recognize, oh, I said I wasn't going to do that anymore and I just did it. Or maybe it's like, I said I wasn't going to do that anymore and I've been doing that all morning, right? It might be hours away, but the more we're conscious of it and the more we're committed to it, the sooner we start recognizing it. And then pretty soon it fades away and it's not a habit anymore because it has to do with brain science, right? There's an idea that neurons fire together, but they can be unwired. And how does that happen that we unwire them? How do we stop telling that story that we tell all the time? I'm a relationship coach. So one of the stories I hear all the time is all the good men are taken, right? I mainly coach women who are heterosexual, and that's all the good men are taken. And it's like, that's just a story. And you have to stop saying it because we always prove our stories correct. We will create a reality that makes our story true. And so when you catch yourself, you change it. And I think it's important to create a better story. You think about a piece of furniture. If I have a coffee table in my living room and I hate it, it's old, it's ugly, I'm just sick of it. And one day I think, you know what, I'm tired of this thing. I'm gonna drag it out and put it in the garage. I just can't deal with it anymore. I want my living room to be beautiful. If I don't replace it with a new coffee table, in a week or less, I'm going to be dragging that one back in because I don't have any place to put my coffee, right? So it's like we have to replace those stories that are causing us pain into better stories. So a commitment to change it, an awareness of when it's happening, and something to replace it that's better. And, it's the same reason, like some people say they don't like affirmations because they feel like they're lying. So they look in the mirror and they say, I have a strong, healthy, fit body, but I look in the mirror and I see that's not true and I'm lying to myself, right? Well, here's a tweak that I really like for that. I'm in the process of, or I'm learning how to have, right? I'm learning how to be comfortable with a lot more money. I'm in the process of becoming a millionaire or whatever, right? That makes the statement true. So you can create your story the same way, like just that's one of the things I do with clients is I help them create a story that feels good to them and feels true to them and that they can commit to. Okay. And yeah, that's when you see someone's life change.
So I'm hearing a lot of different really interesting, important points here. One, we're talking about self-awareness. We're talking about a willingness to do something about it. We're strategic. I hear you saying, you're choosing a story with them that they could get behind, that there's enough of a present tense change orientation in there that they're like, it doesn't feel too distant from them. It doesn't feel like something else. Now, hearing you say all those things, one piece I'm also hearing here, now I'm just kind of like projecting and maybe putting some words in your mouth, is that this is really about creating a pattern interrupt on that less healthy pattern, but also doing it as potently and powerfully as you can. And to that end, one thing I have in theory that I've seen work in my life in terms of like auto correcting things, some that you see and some that you don't see, is gratitude. Because I found in my experience that when you're focusing on gratitude, it's such a shift. If you were assuming you were not focusing on gratitude before, it's such a shift in your perspective, in your life view, that it almost rattles that cage and it rattles a few of the patterns. It helps you spot things that have been going on that are not so healthy. It helps you stay resilient because there's a level of extra hope and enthusiasm and confidence in there. And it kind of like, again, it cascades out to land based on how you work with your clients.
Yeah, I think that gratitude is very important. And I also think it's very important to be very real about what you're feeling. And the reason why I say that is because there is something that masquerades as gratitude, but I like to call it optimistic denial. And sometimes that's fine, but a lot of times, and I'll tell you how it can work in a way that's not really beneficial, and that is that sometimes people are really unhappy with certain, thing going on in their life, but they don't want to admit that because they feel a little ashamed about that because there's so many other things in their life that are great. And so they might be saying, well, who am I to complain about this thing? Because look, I have this and this and this and this, and all those things are so great. So I'm just going to pretend like it's all okay. And, a lot of times that keeps people stuck in bad relationships. It keeps people stuck in jobs they don't really like. So I think that it's important to be honest about what's going on that you're not quite happy with, and then find the silver lining and find the things that you are grateful for, because there's a balance there. And it certainly can go in the other direction where, we're always talking about all the things we don't like. And in that case, a lot of times people are thinking, wow, this person's complaining about all these things, and yet they have so many things in their life that I would be grateful for, right? So we want to be able to, yes, see all the things that we can be grateful for, be honest about the things that we want to change, and then start working on changing them while still holding the energy of the gratitude of all the other things that are going well or things that we've created that we do appreciate. Appreciation is really important. I agree with you completely. It's right at the top of the energy scale there. And so focusing on that, and yet also focusing on, how we want to improve the other parts. It's like we can't ignore the weeds in the garden because they'll take over. Right?
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you put it this way. And everyone is different, obviously, but the reason it's really standing out to me is like in all the times I've felt gratitude, I guess I've been lucky in this way. I've always just automatically gone to the things that I've genuinely been grateful for. And the stuff that I wasn't, I just wouldn't focus on. So it's really, I'm glad that you're bringing this up because I will almost go on the assumption that people are only being grateful for things that they're actually grateful for and leaning into that, where it's really important now to hear this possibility, this perspective that some people might be overreaching and they might be trying to find something that they're lying to themselves about, which is a shame considering that everyone's got something to be genuinely grateful for anyway. Everyone's got those go-tos that if they lean in that direction, it's really going to shift their perspective in a really powerful way. So thank you for bringing it up for anyone out there, that might be watching this and has been trying to like force too much good where there isn't, especially since they've already got good available to them. And I'm wondering, like, as I say that, as I notice this, is this something where you spot clients struggle with this a lot in terms of gratitude, or you just see it enough that it really bears mentioning for anyone that might be going through it?
I see it I see it in a lot of different ways. And I think that a lot of times people that have a tendency to be real people pleasers and also want to, um, they've learned about conscious creation, magic, law of attraction, whatever you want to call it. And they've also absorbed a certain frame that says it's not cool for you to feel things that don't feel good. And so when they're feeling things that don't feel good, they're not honest about it. They'll cover it up. They'll shove those feelings down. I mean, I've coached so many women that will never allow themselves to be angry, because as little girls, we were taught, you know, pretty is as pretty does. And if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And all of these kind of maxims that we were not allowed to be angry. And so that anger doesn't get expressed because sometimes people have never learned how to express it in a healthy way. And I always tell my clients, look, anger is fine. Resentment, it's okay to have these kind of feelings. What's not okay is for you to have an inappropriate display of anger. Like, we don't want you breaking things, shooting people, you know, saying things that are hurtful. But the best way I know to process emotions that are on that lower end of the emotional scale, the ones that make us feel uncomfortable, is just to say, when this happens, I feel angry.
Yeah.
I don't have to yell it. I don't have to be, you know, offensive to anyone. I could just say, I feel really frustrated about this. I have a tendency to start feeling resentful when I'm doing too much and I feel like I'm overreaching. I really feel angry when this happens, right? And then a lot of times once someone has just expressed that they had that feeling, it just goes away.
Yeah, you used the two key words in there, expressing and processing. And I'm with that too. I think it's really important. I agree, where it's important for people to express and process so that they don't dwell. Because like me, and I'm sure you'll agree, but I invite you to correct me if I'm wrong. You know, no one wants to dwell in anger. No one wants to dwell in resentment, but you end up doing that and you're not allowing yourself to express and process emotion. So if I'm understanding you right, it's all about giving yourself permission to feel and express emotion so that you process it, and that's no longer part of your psyche, no longer part of your mindset, no longer part of your vibration. And instead, you've kind of freed yourself of that versus bottling it up without realizing it and having it grip onto you unnecessarily. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Absolutely. You know, you just used a phrase that's such a perfect metaphor, right? Bottling it up. Because what happens when you bottle something? You know, like my husband's been growing like way too many cucumbers and I've been making pickles all summer, right? So what am I doing? I'm putting the pickles in the jar and I'm putting a cap on it. Like they're in there, right? Until you open the cap, the pickles are in the jar. So it's like bottling it up. When we don't let ourselves express our feelings, all of the feelings, I always say this, I say, all your feelings are a miracle, all of them. They're all giving you information. They are not good or bad. They may be comfortable and pleasurable and uncomfortable and even painful, but they're not good or bad, positive or negative. I never use those words because they're all valuable. So bottled up, I love that you said that, because it's like, what happens if you bottle up anger and frustration and resentment and sadness and grief? If you bottle them up, you're literally like putting a cap on it and holding it inside.
Yeah.
And how do you think that affects your vibration? I mean, good grief. Like, then people get even more frustrated with themselves and they tell a story that, you know, that they're not good at this, that they can't create good things. And it's like a lot of it is because it builds on itself, these kind of stories, and we keep them inside instead of just expressing them in a healthy way. So that's another thing that I help people do, is have permission to feel whatever they're feeling and to understand why, and then to change the things that are bringing those feelings about. You know, there's a phrase that's been in my head all week, and it's that shame is the magic killer. And I don't know where I heard that or where I got it, but it popped into my head at the beginning of the week, and I've thought about it over and over. And so many times, especially in law of attraction communities, people start feeling shame that they have feelings that aren't, you know, at the top of that emotional scale. And they don't want to tell anybody because then they feel they're going to be judged for feeling these things, because people will say, like there's this high vibes only kind of mentality. And I'm not about that mentality. I wish we could all just have high vibes only, because those are the ones that feel so great. But welcome to Earth,
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for people to understand, positive emotions and feelings so much more powerful than negative ones. And it's a thing where it's a natural part of life. And if people end up running it from all the time, they actually end up creating. The more you run and hide from that stuff, the more you create. Versus I've got the attitude of, listen, I'm going to take 5 minutes every single day and lean into the positive emotions, knowing that that's creating momentum in my vibration, in my mindset, in my psychology, in every aspect of me. And then when or if things happen that I don't necessarily appreciate, I cope with them better. I get past them better, and they're less frequent. And I think it's important for people to realize that things are less frequent without them realizing it, because they're not going through it, because they're bypassing it, because they're giving themselves the permission to lean into positivity and not worry so much about negativity when it pops up.
Exactly. And I think just knowing that, just having someone say, look, you're human. These are all, like, I think about it. We're wired for pain. What happens when you touch a hot fire? You burn yourself, you yank your hand away. I mean, we don't want to be touching hot fire, but we are made with all of these different emotions. And so just taking away the judgment, your level of consciousness, which equals your level to create consciously, is directly related to your lack of judging. So when we are judging things as good or bad, we're not real high on that scale yet. So if we can take the judgment out of it and just say, I felt really angry. It felt really terrible. I didn't like it at all, but this is what happened. When XYZ happened, when I saw that, I felt anger. It's okay to do that. And you're totally right. By doing that, then we just let it go instead of keeping it bottled up. So I think it's really important to not have those judgments about emotions and to give ourselves permission to feel whatever we feel.
Yeah. And one thing, you highlighted my use of the term bottling up. As you were saying that, I got this image of there being no breathing room in that jar. And I think that kind of lends itself to people when they are bottling things up, when they are hiding from bad emotions. There's no there's no room for expansion. There's no room for processing. There's no room for progress. And they're really denying themselves this way by being, like you said, judgmental or being in shame about the emotion versus, all right, you know what? First of all, I'm not going to do anything that's going to be bad. I'm not going to scream at someone, but I'm going to lock myself in my house. I'm going to scream. I'm going to process. I'm going to let it out. And then I'm going to move on, and I'm going to have a cookie, or I'm going to watch a movie, or I'm going to go walk in nature. I'm going to pet my dog. And most importantly, I'm going to smile.
I love that you said all that, because just in the last couple of days, I had someone reach out to me and they said they were really struggling with something that they were going through and that they just felt like crying. And that they just said, how do I I don't want to be crying all the time. How do I get past this? And I said, go set a timer for 15 minutes and be with the tears. Be with them. Let them be there without any judgment. Just be with the tears. And at the end of 15 minutes, you've given yourself that space. Then get up, have a glass of water, go walk in nature, put on some music and dance, smile, like direct yourself in that way. And it's funny because everything you just said I was like, that's exactly what I was encouraging someone else to do. Just be with that emotion. And they said they were afraid. What if I can't bring myself out of it? I said, you're not going to have a problem bringing yourself out of it, because here's the plan. You've made a plan. You've made a commitment, an intention to do a certain thing. What am I going to do? I'm going to set my timer for 15 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and be with this sadness and let it flow through me. Emotions are energy in motion, emotion. They have to move in the body, and they move in different ways. Sadness often requires tears, right? So that's my idea about it.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist, all those disclaimers, right? But I think that we would all be a lot healthier if we would give ourselves permission to experience and express whatever we feel in our body. We're learning more and more about somatic things, and that trauma is held in the body. It's not in the head. Like everything's in our head, of course. But things are held in our body. And so often we numb ourselves out, so we don't feel what's going on in the body. And, we've got bottled up things that we've numbed out. So it's like, if we just let ourselves feel a little bit, and if we take the judgment away and be okay with saying that we feel these things, then we can start to process, like you said.
Yeah. And I don't work with people as often as you do. It's not my business model. But one thing, putting on my coaching hat real quick, when you told me about that person who they used the excuse that they're scared of being stuck in it, to me, that's like, it's one of those things that people often do to themselves to hold themselves back. They're basically finding an excuse to keep them from doing the thing that's going to get them out of the pain that they're in. And, I think it's so important. I love that you're bringing awareness to people for this, and self-awareness, because once people know that, and once people are allowed, give themselves permission to realize that they're not going to be caught in, and that there's light at the end of the tunnel, I think that's where a lot of magic happens, and where a lot of progress just, comes to be. And I'm sure you know that better than me, just because you work with people so much more.
Well, it's funny. I don't know if I've ever really thought about this until right now, but we were talking earlier about so many emotions sort of being looked down upon, even as children. Like, what do we like? Don't cry, right? We're told not to cry. We're told not to do this, not to do that. No one ever usually gets reprimanded too much if they're happy, right? Children might be too happy and making noise or laughing out louder, and then be told to, calm down a little bit. But for the most part, it's okay if we're happy. Those are good emotions, and nobody, those are labeled good, and no one talks too much about us stopping. But if we're throwing a fit, or we're angry, or we're sad or something, we often get told to stop. So if we develop our life in a way that from the time we're children, we think those emotions aren't really acceptable, so we bottle them up, or we keep them in, we ignore them, we push them down, whatever metaphor you want to use, it makes sense that deciding we're going to go ahead and let ourselves feel them might feel a little scary. It's not something we're used to, right? It's not familiar. And so we're like, I don't know what's going to happen if I let myself feel this. I've heard people talk about anger the same way. It's like, I don't want to be enraged and do something I regret, right? It's like, well, you're just going to make the plan that you're not going to do that. You're just going to make the intention that you're going to be okay with saying how you feel. That's the first step. Just, I feel whatever. Awesome. And remember, feelings and emotions are two different things. Emotions, the four basic emotions: happy, sad, glad, and scared. Somebody told me once that they were in an improv group, and that they used to say happy, sad, mad, and a frad. But the four major emotions, and then feelings. Feelings are, I have a knot in my stomach, my jaw feels tight, the back of my head hurts, or whatever. Those are actual body sensations. And it's really smart for us to get a wider emotional vocabulary, where we have more words than just those four. Because the wider our vocabulary is, the easier it is for us to express how we're feeling emotion-wise. And then a felt sense of what we feel, to widen our experience of that, where we can really say, oh, when this happened, I got a knot in my stomach, or whatever, because that's our experience. And so opening up the depth and width of how we express feelings, that's important too. And all of this is on topic with law of attraction, because remember that the very top of the emotional scale is where we create consciously with most ease. So we want to let go of the feelings that would be on the bottom. We want to process them, work them through, be able to let go of them, because when we do that, we automatically pop up to the higher emotions. If you can let go, if you process sadness and grief and anger and resentment, you process those things and work through them, you'll automatically feel emotions that are higher up the scale. And that will lend itself to you being able to create things that you want.
Love it. So now that, obviously we've established the importance of not being fearful of those negative emotions, being willing to run through and process them. And with the understanding that there's no such thing as one size fits all, and I'm not giving you context here, but just to serve as widely as possible for anyone that might be watching this, whether it's tomorrow or a year from now or whenever, what are your favorite tips for giving someone who wants to proactively and strategically lean, not run from negative, but strategically lean into positive emotions? What are the things they could or should do based on your experience?
Well, I think that changing the story is one of the most important things. And one of the ways you can begin to be more honest about your emotions, that, people sometimes get a little nervous because they're like, oh no, that means I have to like say these things to someone else. You really don't. It might benefit you to have a conversation with someone where you're honest about an emotion, of course, but also just when you're by yourself, how do you feel about certain things? And they may be things that aren't even directly connected to you, right? So I might get used to saying things like this when I'm all by myself. I might get used to saying, oh, when I look out my window here and I see the little birds at my bird feeder, I feel so happy. Oh, I was just turned on the news and I saw this devastating thing that happened in another country, and I feel really sad when I see that. Or, oh, I feel really proud of Simone Biles for taking care of herself, right? It's like I'm saying what I feel about certain things. And what that does is it gets you used to paying attention to how you're feeling. And then you start, like you said, then you start leaning into what feels good. Sometimes I even ask myself, if something's not feeling good, okay, what would feel better right now? Walt and I have talked about this on the podcast, is like, it's such a great question to ask yourself, right? When you're down in a place that's not feeling good, it's just, okay, take a second, take a deep breath. What would feel better right now? Sometimes it's just going to feel better for me to get up out of my office chair and go take a walk. But it's awareness. It's just bringing your awareness to what feels better. And without ignoring what doesn't feel good, being honest with yourself about what's not feeling good, and then asking yourself what would feel better. Because so many times if we ignore something that doesn't feel good, what it reminds me of is, have you ever been shopping and you see the little kid with their mom in the store and they're yanking on her sweatshirt or skirt, mom, 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 mom. And she's busy shopping and she's like, just a minute, like, mom, 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 what? But if we would just give our inner voice that's saying to us, hey, 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 just give it some attention, right? Then we can deal with it and go back to whatever we were doing. But so often we ignore it and it nags us, and it actually can become dis-ease in the body, right? It's like we ignore a little whisper from our body long enough, it becomes a scream, and then we can't ignore it anymore. I know people that have not been honest about a relationship or a job, those two things a lot, and ended up just with something in their body where they were pretty much screaming in pain, because their bodies, like our bodies are so smart and our bodies talk to us all the time. And so often we don't listen. And so it talks a little louder. So I think just being aware, being willing to be aware and not judge yourself for emotions and feelings that you have. That's the main thing.
Nice. And I'm even just going one extra notch on that. I'm hearing self-awareness, and through that self-awareness, a higher level of self-care and self-understanding.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yes.
Cool. Loving it. All right. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. Cindie, if people want to connect with you or learn more about you, what is the best way for them to do so?
Well, they can find me all over the interwebs. My website, cindiechavez.com. It's CindieChavez. You can find me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, at my website. I have a contact form. And I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear, just give me a shout, say hello.
Awesome. Well, Cindie, again, this has been really great. I knew that this interview was going to be very powerful, but you always start, you never know the direction it's going to go. But I love how we were able to peel back a few of those layers on that onion of the human psyche, because I think what you're talking about here, a lot of people just don't think of oftentimes, when if they only did. and only leaned into that self-awareness, they would be leaning also into a lot more joy and fulfillment. So thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your gifts and sharing your insight. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.